Hi, my name is Patrick Jackson, and this is my Module 1 Me in Action Research. A bit about myself. I live in Wichita, Kansas. I graduated from Wichita State University, and I taught PE for 9 years. This year, I will be serving a support role in the office with the administrators, and so it's my first year out of PE. I have a 1-year-old Weimaraner, and my hobbies include anything outdoors or sports. I also ran track at Wichita State. I am now currently the head track coach at Wichita Southeast High School. I've been coaching at Southeast for 10 years. I'm also the boys basketball coach at my school, Gordon Parks Academy. I facilitate the BASE Club at my school, which stands for Better Academic and Social Excellence. It is a Boys of Color initiative to try to help boys of color maintain grades going into high school, and emphasize the idea that learning is cool and not to fall off because your friends are falling off. The Middle School Challenge is another club I facilitate, which is our partnership with the Little League football in Wichita that is not affiliated with the school district. So it's how we ensure that boys are academically eligible, even though they're playing non-interscholastic sports. And I also am the 2018 recipient of the Distinguished Classroom Teacher Award in Wichita. My school, Gordon Parks Academy, STEM Leaders in Applied and Media Arts, is a public K-8 magnet. It's in Wichita, Kansas, USD 259, and our elementary K through 5 is a neighborhood magnet. So those students who live in the neighborhood are able to come in. Students are also able to apply through the magnet process if they are outside of our zone. And then our middle school is a traditional magnet in which all those students have to apply and be accepted. We service between 400 and 450 students every year. Only about 150 of those are middle schoolers. And our diversity has been growing rapidly since the adoption of our new magnet theme about 5 years ago. We used to be about 95% African American and 95% low socioeconomic status, and that is currently changing since our magnet theme has changed. Diversity is getting greater, and low socioeconomic status of our students and families is lowering. So, critical reflection, what is action research? Action research is a type of inquiry that is practical, theoretical, and concerned with change and improvement. The purpose, there are lots of purposes and goals thrown out in those materials, and so selecting that was kind of difficult, but I selected the purpose as defining and changing areas of problems of interest in a school, and that applies to individuals, teachers and students, individual classrooms, buildings and districts. The different types of action research were technical, mutual collaborative, enhancement, and participatory. And the goals that I chose were evaluating outcomes, enhancing student achievement, improving educational practices. Pretty straightforward. The steps involved in action research, there's a lot of side steps or other layers to it, but basically most of the resources we had pointed to these 5 steps. Planning, where you identify your problem, look into the materials and support you need to develop your plan, and then putting that plan into action, where you're working with students or other teachers to facilitate what you came up with through your research, followed by the 3rd step of observing and getting the information and the feedback from what you were putting into play, whether that's gathering data or just observation, and then reflecting on what you observed and what you collected. Did it work? What needed to be different? And other factors that went into your plan that you implemented. And once you get that reflection, that starts the process over again, and you're able to use that data and analysis to develop a new plan. So it's a very ongoing cyclical process. Critical reflection, what's the difference between action research and research? I think the key is in the word action, and so it's a process that is very active, and it allows participants and observers to experience problem solving as well as model it for their students or anybody else who they're implementing those problem solving pieces to. dissolves the barriers between participants and researchers and brings both groups into the fold. Allows for constant monitoring the consequences for students of the changes they introduce in their practices, and that's not necessarily consequences in a negative term, but just more the outcome is able to be monitored rather than just theorizing. You're actually able to see your plan put into place and what the outcome is afterwards. It lends itself to self-evaluation, as you can see how your plan is working in real time, and it's very cyclical. It's not a one and done process, but it's a continual dynamic process. Common problems in action research. A large group of problems that I identified were the ethical challenges that come from such a broad group of possibilities to implementing a plan. Some of those elements included time. It could be a very lengthy process. Is there a power struggle involved with your process or your active research? Are there data boundaries that you have to be worried about? Are there things that are put into play that are a little bit unforeseen or can be easily influenced by other factors? And that also goes along with role confusion, where different people that are involved in the study, whether they are the subjects being observed or the observer, different role confusions, especially if you're doing a collaborative effort, can come into play. Action research is rarely conclusive, and so where it may not be a process that you're looking for an absolute solution, it's a process of ongoing learning and ongoing improvement. And then adding too many variables or taking too much action can make a plan unmanageable. I looked at three things in my own evaluation. As I instruct, I think it lends itself to me as a PE teacher teaching multiple grade levels throughout the day, from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade. It's very class by class implementation, and so there is almost a form of action research involved, where I can look at what worked for one grade level, and I can make tweaks as I go up the ladder, or work with similar grade levels that aren't more than 1 year apart in difference, from 2nd to 3rd grade or from 5th to 6th grade. We implement standard reference grading in my district, and so that is also something that lends itself pretty well to action research. It's very concrete what you're looking for students to demonstrate mastery of a skill, and so finding different ways to give them opportunities to demonstrate their mastery can be utilized. And then temperature checks is a piece that I very strongly believe in, and that for me, I call it my launch. Some people call it their clothing, but getting a good idea of if what you're implementing is actually working in real time. So how that affects learners and how that affects me as an instructor is, number one, I took it from one of the videos we watched, but it moves you from just being an experienced teacher to an expert. So it affects both the teacher and the learner's behaviors to encourage progress. You're not just showing up and getting your experience, but you're actually teaching yourself and learning how to have stronger practices that are going to build stronger results. Applies proactivity rather than reactivity, and then boosts metacognition of students as well as all participants in action research. Can be looked at as learners because it is a two-way street, and if you're communicating what your purpose is behind that, it's not just you that becomes a learner in that situation. My critique is that we are constantly following action research steps, that I am constantly following action research steps, but I'm not necessarily recording or keeping data. I feel like a lot of what we saw in the materials are things that I kind of already do in my process, but I'm kind of doing it aimlessly. And so that's something I can kind of reflect on when we look at those materials. In my building, we do peer walkthroughs that I feel like lend themselves really well to this, and they're for all different kinds of things. We have a group of non-negotiables in our building that are supposed to be seen, that not only try to stimulate engagement in students, but also the instruction and just building a strong learning environment. We see not only those non-negotiables during the walkthroughs, but we also collect data on engagement strategies that we've seen. We do celebrations when we see good engagement strategies. We try to point those out and shoot them out to the masses so other people are getting those best practices. And then we're also implementing in our district something called WIGs, or wildly important goals. And so we're setting up a set of lead and lag measures to base student achievement on, in which case we are setting a long-term goal for ourselves and then using short-term goals to reach that. So furthermore, with data collection, we also use a Marzano teacher evaluation, and to me that's more of that district-wide action research, collecting data on practices that are happening, not necessarily looking for immediate learner outcomes, but hopefully looking for teacher outcomes in their instruction that will then affect the learner outcomes. So our processes of practice encourage cultural relevant teaching, effective engagement strategies, innovative technology use, and data-driven instruction that effectively increases the level of achievement of our students. And I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand with those components from our standards. The way that this assignment correlates to the standards for me is that it addresses utilization of data, collaboration, and instruction based on action research to increase awareness and promotion, incorporation of technology use, cultural relevance, equitable practices, and curriculum to create a more effective educational setting. A lot of those resources that we looked at during this assignment pointed to those things. Relevant to my own learning, I think that this assignment pointed out to me that many of the steps taken in action research are steps that I already utilize, but like I said earlier, kind of aimlessly and without purpose. And so collecting data and being able to create some form of usable feedback that can be more beneficial to myself, but also shareable to other people. My instructional changes occur based on my memory and recognizing similar situations in students or professional activities, rather than having something I can go to look at or keeping kind of a running record of what it is that I'm changing. And then my reflection is, as a future building leader, I believe that engaging in action research practices with the staff would be an effective and impactful professional development opportunity to help try to build the culture of learning in the school, not only for the students, but also for educators and building wide, while we're trying to increase the achievement of our students. Those are my references. Thank you for participating in my presentation, and I look forward to seeing yours.